It hits you the moment you drive into downtown Los Angeles. The shining billboards, the glass towers, the polished streets. And then, just beneath it all, a sea of tents sprawled out like a second city. California, once the beacon of American prosperity, is now the epicenter of a humanitarian catastrophe it can't hide anymore. The homeless crisis isn't creeping anymore. It's exploding, and no one in charge seems capable of slowing it down. The numbers are brutal. California holds just 12% of America's population, but an astonishing 30% of it homeless. Every day, more people are pushed onto the streets. Evictions surge. Shelter beds are maxed out. Families live in cars, working 2 jobs and still failing to secure a roof over their heads. A state once synonymous with dreams now serves as a brutal stage for desperation. The driving forces are glaring, yet somehow still ignored. Sky-high housing costs have ripped the bottom out of affordability. A 1-bedroom apartment in major cities can eat up 70% of an average worker's paycheck. That's if you even qualify. Landlords reject tenants over the tiniest blemish on credit reports, demanding perfect incomes in an economy built on instability. Inflation, wage stagnation, and a housing supply choked by regulations form a noose tightening around the necks of working Californians. Politicians love to talk about solutions, but their efforts barely scratch the surface. Billions are thrown into initiatives that sound good on paper, but collapse in execution. Modular housing units that cost more than luxury condos. Shelters that take years to build, but are obsolete before they open. Pet projects soaked in bureaucracy, while real people rot in tents under beating sun. California doesn't have a resource problem. It has a leadership problem. And it's not just a stereotype of the homeless loner battling addiction. That story is outdated. Today's California homeless are teachers, nurses, delivery drivers, grandmothers. Kids are still doing their homework by flashlight in parked minivans. The myth that homelessness is caused by bad choices is dying a hard death against the reality that in California, simply falling behind for 1 month can be a death sentence. The economic engine that once fueled California's rise is now cannibalizing itself. When you price out your workforce, when you abandon affordable housing to speculative luxury towers, when you turn eviction into standard business practice, you light a fuse. That fuse is burning fast. Companies are relocating. Middle-class families are fleeing. And left behind are those who have nowhere else to go, swelling a humanitarian disaster visible from every freeway on-ramp. Mental health and drug addiction pour gasoline on this fire. Yes, but they are symptoms, not causes. The real cause is systemic economic cruelty, disguised as prosperity. A system that rewards hoarding over helping, where tent cities grow beneath luxury condos that sit empty as investment vehicles, where billionaires debate policy from their hillsides, while hundreds die anonymously on the streets below them. Los Angeles spends over $1 billion a year on homelessness. San Francisco pours in hundreds of millions. Yet, the tent cities grow. Encampments snake along sidewalks, under bridges, around parks, turning once thriving neighborhoods into surreal wastelands. Solutions vanish into endless layers of consultants, studies, PR campaigns, while the human cost skyrockets without mercy. California's crisis has become a national embarrassment, weaponized by politicians across the spectrum. The left points fingers at capitalism gone rogue. The right weaponizes the decay as proof of progressive failure. Meanwhile, the homeless themselves become invisible casualties in a war of narratives that does nothing to actually fix the problem. And if you think it can't get worse, think again. A brutal new wave is coming. Pandemic-era eviction protections have expired. Inflation continues to outpace wages. The state's budget deficit looms, meaning future cuts to the very programs barely holding the line now. We're standing on the edge of a humanitarian cliff, and the ground is already starting to crumble. You cannot solve a housing crisis without building housing. That's the brutal math. California's zoning laws, NIMBYism, environmental regulations, and bureaucratic inertia make new construction nearly impossible. Projects are strangled in lawsuits, permitting delays, and public outrage long before the first brick is even laid. Without radical change, without a demolition of the barriers to affordable housing, Every dollar spent will be chasing a crisis that grows faster than any budget can contain. Cities like Los Angeles have tried sanctioned camping zones, tiny home villages, massive outreach programs. But each Band-Aid rips open faster than it can be applied. Until California can create affordable permanent housing on a massive scale, the homeless population will continue to mushroom, no matter how much money is thrown at temporary shelters and emergency services. The cost isn't just financial. It's human. It's the 8-year-old doing homework at midnight in a motel bathroom because that's the only light available. It's the elderly woman choosing between food and rent. It's the addict who never had a fighting chance because the system threw him away before he even got started. This crisis shatters families, dreams, lives. And the longer California waits to address it at its root, the more irreversible the damage becomes. In Sacramento, leaders announce plan after plan, standing at podiums promising change, promising compassion. Yet the streets tell a different story. Each abandoned stroller, each crumpled tent, each shattered soul testifies to a state that abandoned its own citizens in pursuit of an image it can no longer afford to maintain. The divide grows sharper every year. Gated communities fortify themselves against a growing tide of human suffering. Security cameras and private patrols offer a false sense of separation. But homelessness doesn't stay on the sidewalks. It bleeds into every corner of public life. Overcrowded emergency rooms, overburdened police departments, collapsing public transit, strained schools. No wall is high enough to keep out the consequences. And beneath all of this, the unbearable question: if California, with all its wealth, all its innovation, all its political power, cannot solve homelessness, then who can? What hope is there for the rest of the country, watching its own housing costs rise, its own social safety nets fray, its own cities tip toward collapse? There's a deep, cold anger building among Californians. Homeowners are furious that tent encampments line their neighborhoods. Homeless families were furious that the promise of a better life was a lie. Middle-class workers are furious that despite doing everything right, education, hard work, sacrifice, they still live one paycheck away from disaster. This isn't sustainable. It isn't humane. And it isn't inevitable unless California chooses paralysis over change. The state can either become a cautionary tale for the rest of America, or it can become the place where real, brutal, uncomfortable change begins. Radical solutions are no longer optional. They are surviving. Legalizing dense housing construction, slashing the red tape, subsidizing low-income housing without enriching developers, creating wraparound services that treat mental health, addiction, and poverty at the root instead of just reacting to symptoms. These aren't progressive fantasies. They are economic necessities. California must confront an ugly truth. The crisis won't be solved by public relations campaigns or half measures designed to win election cycles. It will take breaking deeply entrenched systems that favor the privileged at the expense of the desperate. It means cities must stop treating affordable housing as a theoretical good and start treating it as an emergency infrastructure project, just as urgent as repairing a collapsed bridge or responding to a wildfire. Because that's exactly what this is, a slow-moving disaster with no containment line. The market alone will not fix this. Housing development driven purely by profit has no incentive to build units the working poor can afford. Left unchecked, the invisible hand simply slaps the vulnerable down harder. Government must step into that void with strength and clarity, not timid grants and pilot programs, but bold, massive intervention, tax incentives, public-private partnerships, direct construction of social housing. These aren't ideological battlegrounds anymore. They're the minimum price of saving California's future. But it can't stop at housing. Housing is a foundation, not the entire structure. Without accessible mental health services, substance abuse treatment, job training programs, and basic health care, housing alone becomes another failed experiment. Homelessness is complex because humans are complex. Any plan that tries to simplify it down to a single cause or a single fix is doomed to fail before the first dollar is spent. The political will must match the scale of the crisis. That means telling hard truths to every stakeholder. It means telling voters that dense housing might change their neighborhoods, and that's necessary. It means telling developers that affordability mandates aren't optional. It means telling city officials that endless delay is as deadly as inaction. It means telling the public that without collective sacrifice now, the price later will be catastrophic and irreversible. California's future is balanced on a knife's edge. Every year of half measures, of piecemeal solutions, pushes the state closer to normalizing mass homelessness as a permanent feature of life. Once normalized, it will be almost impossible to unwind. The question now isn't whether the crisis can be solved. It's whether California is willing to endure the political pain required to solve it, and whether it's willing to start today, before it becomes too late to start all. California has the money, it has talent, it has a desperate, pounding urgency. What it lacks is political will unshackle from corporate donors, entrenched bureaucracy, and performative optics. Until that changes, every plan will fail before it even starts. And the cruelty is, there is no neutral ground. Inaction is action. Every day wasted is another life lost. Every year of half measures is another generation swallowed by streets that offer no mercy and no future. California's homelessness crisis isn't just about housing. It's about whether society chooses to save its people or sacrifice them to the altar of profit and image. It's about whether the Golden State can still live up to the promise that once defined it, or whether it will collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. The story of homelessness in California is not a fluke. It's the logical result of decades of policies that favored scarcity, exclusion, and illusion over resilience. It's the outcome of celebrating astronomical property values without considering the social wreckage left behind. It's what happens when a state falls so in love with its own myth that it forgets who built in the first place. Once upon a time, California was built by dreamers who believed that anyone could come here and make it. But now, the barriers of entry are so high that even those born here are being pushed out. Artists, teachers, nurses, service workers, those who breathe life into a community, are being priced into oblivion, and the spaces they leave behind aren't filled by new life. They're filled by silence, decay, and growing resentment. Every tent city is a mirror to a system that chooses profits over people. Every encampment growing along the sidewalks of San Francisco, Sacramento, Oakland, San Diego tells the same damning story. In the Golden State, survival has become a privilege, not a right. When a society accepts thousands of people living and dying in filth, while luxury skyscrapers gleam overhead, it signals something profoundly broken at its core. The cost of inaction is already spilling over. Tourism declines. Public health risks surge. Businesses shutter as neighborhoods become no-go zones. Emergency rooms overflow with untreated mental illness and preventable diseases. Public transportation systems hemorrhage riders as safety becomes a daily gamble. Cities are bleeding out economically, socially, and morally, and yet the leadership continues fiddling around the edges. The longer California delays real action, the harder the road back becomes. Each year, the homeless population grows. The harder it is to catch up. What was a manageable fire years ago is now a raging inferno, and the response continues to be spraying it with a garden hose. Token projects, hollow promises, media-friendly cleanups for photo ops. None of it stops the underlying collapse. And for every person still clinging to hope, there are more slipping away. More choosing death over another day of brutal survival. More falling into addiction not because they were weak, but because the daily pain demanded numbness. More families are dissolving under the unbearable weight of a system designed to grind them down. The death toll is no longer hidden. It's out in the open for anyone willing to look. The future California faces isn't hypothetical anymore. It's already unfolding. Without massive intervention, the Golden State risks becoming a two-tier society, a dystopia where the ultra-wealthy live in walled fortresses, while tens of thousands exist in a permanent underclass with no pathway back. This isn't hyperbole. This is a trajectory written into every housing policy, every stalled development, every closed shelter. Some communities have tried to fight back. Grassroots movements pushing for real affordable housing. Mutual aid networks delivering survival supplies to encampments. Church groups opening parking lots at night for families sleeping in cars. But these efforts, noble as they are, operate without the scale or resources needed to turn the tide. They're fighting a tidal wave with buckets. If California is serious about saving itself, it must think and act on a revolutionary scale. It must bulldoze the regulatory and political barriers preventing construction of affordable housing. It must stop treating homelessness as a temporary inconvenience and start treating it as the full-blown societal collapse that it is. It must prioritize humans over headlines, people over property values, future generations over quarterly profits. And this fight won't be clean. It won't be easy. It won't be popular with everyone. There will be lawsuits. There will be outrage. There will be backlash from the comfortable who benefit from the status quo. But if California refuses to make those sacrifices now, it will be forced to make even harsher ones later, when the crisis is too massive to contain it all. No more waiting for perfect solutions. No more hiding behind pilot programs and ribbon cuttings. The people dying on the streets don't have time for 5-year plans. They needed action yesterday. Every day wasted on political theater costs lives that could have been saved with bold, immediate choices. Courage alone, however, won't lay a single brick. It must be channeled into a relentless campaign of policy, planning, and execution. It means funding real projects, not just approving budgets and holding press conferences. It means tracking results ruthlessly and discarding programs that fail, no matter how politically convenient they once were. It means putting outcomes before optics every single time. It also demands reshaping the culture of housing itself, ending the stigma that paints renters and low-income families as threats to neighborhood character, ending the delusion that property values are a moral achievement rather than an economic lottery. The idea that preserving exclusivity is a civic duty must be replaced by the idea that expanding opportunity is one. And while the government must lead, the private sector cannot be allowed to lurk on the sidelines waiting for subsidies or guarantees. Developers, landlords, tech billionaires, all must be pressed into real partnerships with real accountability. California's crisis is too deep for anyone to pretend neutrality. Every major institution in the state must decide whether it's part of the problem or part of the solution, and act accordingly. Because the truth is blunt, there is no safe middle ground anymore. The longer the crisis festers, the more it destabilizes everything, from public health to education to economic growth itself. Homelessness isn't an isolated problem. It's the unraveling thread that can pull down the entire fabric of a state if left ignored. Pretending otherwise is the fastest way to ensure the nightmare becomes permanent. California's legacy is still unwritten. It can be the place where America's housing catastrophe was confronted and defeated, or it can be the first domino to fall, unleashing a wider collapse across the country. The next moves made here won't just define California's future. They'll signal to the world whether the richest society in history can still summon the will to save itself. The choice California faces is stark and unavoidable. Embrace radical change or collapse beneath the weight of its own failure. Fix the housing crisis at its root, or let the rot devour the dreams that once made this state a global symbol of hope and opportunity. Look around. The signs are everywhere. The California dream is gasping for air, but it's not dead, not yet. It's still possible to save it. It's still possible to rebuild a California that welcomes the strivers, the workers, the forgotten. A California that refuses to let success be measured by the square footage of a mansion or the price of a penthouse suite. But it will require a reckoning, an unflinching willingness to admit that the system as it stands is not working, an urgent commitment to build a new system, not by tinkering around the edges, but by tearing out the rot at the root. There's no silver bullet. No one policy will fix decades of decay. But what's needed most is moral clarity. The recognition that a society is judged not by how it treats its wealthiest, but by how it cares for its most vulnerable. On that score, California is failing spectacularly. There's no excuse left. The crisis is visible in every major city. The data is overwhelming. The human toll is incalculable. And the solutions, while difficult, are known. What's missing is courage. Political courage. Civic courage. The courage to look discomfort in the eye and choose action over apathy. California doesn't lack the money, the technology, or the talent to solve this. What it lacks is the willingness to treat housing as a human right instead of commodity for speculation. Until shelter is valued above stock prices and human dignity outweighs political expediency, The crisis will metastasize beyond anything budget surpluses or innovation hubs can contain. Every crisis is also a crossroads. California has a rare chance to show the world what rebuilding from failure can look like. Not just a return to old myths of prosperity, but a real, modern blueprint for sustainable, humane urban life. It would mean facing uncomfortable truths, breaking with entrenched interests, and committing to a future where prosperity is shared, not hoarded. Because make no mistake, if California fails, the collapse won't stay neatly contained within its borders. Rising homelessness, decaying public trust, and runaway inequality will spread like contagion across the country. The fight for California's soul is not just a local battle. It's a warning and a test for all of America. The world is watching. Other states are watching. Other countries are watching. If the richest state and the richest nation on earth can't solve homelessness, it signals that capitalism without compassion is a death spiral, not a dream. California can still lead the way if it chooses to. Every empty lot could become a home. Every vacant office tower could shelter families. Every dollar spent on endless studies could be spent on construction, on mental health treatment, on addiction recovery, on real pathways off the street. The clock is ticking. The stakes are rising. The only question that remains is whether California will answer the call or let its golden legacy slip forever into rusted decay. If you made it this far, it means you care, and that matters. Hit that like button to amplify this message. Subscribe to stay updated as this story unfolds, and drop a comment below. What do you think is the real solution to California's homelessness crisis? Your voice, your opinion, your engagement, it could spark the conversation that forces real change. Don't just scroll past the problem. Be part of the solution.